Each one of us makes friends with the meaning of those words. I am a gift. Precious child, a wise sage. I am a gift. My presence makes a difference. I am a gift. take another deep breath, I invite you to consider all of the beautiful beloveds in the world who have taken a stand for justice and compassion and peace. Some taking that stand quietly, knowing that their thoughts and their words make a difference. And those who have shouted from the rooftops, "Let there be peace for all. Let there be a world that works for all." We think of ourselves and all the beloveds throughout the endless ages who have taken a stand, perhaps with one word or a lot of words, always the presence of allowing the truth for that moment to ring through and be a part of who they are in the world. For all of us sitting here in these chairs who continually, every day, make a deeper commitment to be a presence of peace, a presence of compassion, a presence of understanding, even in the midst of our confusion, our heartbreaks, our anger, we keep deepening into the awareness that we have the choice to be peace and to be wisdom and to be compassion, even though all around us there may be other kinds of energies. I invite you to listen to the words of a young man. These words were written in his 30s. And he was taking a stand for peace. And we might apply these words to all that's going on in the world right now. In his 30s, Martin Luther King wrote, "There is something that I must say to my people who stand on the warm threshold which leads to the palace of justice. In the process of gaining our rightful place, we must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. We must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protest to degenerate into physical violence. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force." I invite us once again to take a deep breath and to consider which force we are acting from, which force we are making our decisions from. So with our deep breath, we go to the core of our being and we access soul force, the energy of source. The one presence, known by many names. We may need to do this 1,000 times a day, deepening in to the source energy, and from that place, we make our decisions, we speak our words, we move forth with action. From that place. As we take a few moments of silence, we allow our hearts and our minds to deepen, deepen, deepen. what do we do now about this? And this? And this? And this? So many issues, so many opportunities. So many ways we're watching our human family evolve in consciousness. And one moment we hear another report of unkindness. And the next moment we hear another report of great kindness. We keep breathing, breathing, breathing. Opening, opening, opening. As we say every Sunday in the Lord's Prayer, that this fertile ground, the ground of source, let this be the place from which all my actions grow. We give great thanks for the recommitment that we make 1,000 times a day. And so it is, and so we let it be. Namaste. I have to pause a lot and remember that this man was in his 30s at the height of his work. Martin Luther King said, "Peace is not merely a distant goal that we seek, but a means by which we arrive at that goal." How many of us in the room, especially you old hippies and peace activists, let there be peace! And don't we still do that? Why aren't they being kind? And then we're reminded every now and then that Jesus said, pray for your enemies. And we feel like that all the time, right? Praying for our enemies. Wow, what a spiritual practice that is. After many years. Some of you have heard this story. It's one of the stories that guides my life. And if I ever forget, I need you to remind me of this. In Jacksonville, Florida, in the mid-50s, there were protests going on. The people were doing sit-ins and Woolworths. There were riots. There was unkindness going on. Jacksonville, Florida was one of the places where the Klan was very active. And there was a woman who worked in our home, Ida Mae Hill, African-American woman, and I would often go home with her in the afternoon, and my mother would pick me up from there, pick us up from there. And one day, as we're getting on the bus driver looked at me into my eyes and said, "Little lady, you can sit at the front of the bus." And I remember his eyes. Have you ever looked into the eyes of someone who was so filled with hate that it made chills run up and down your spine? His eyes were filled with such hatred, such meanness. And I looked up at Ida Mae and to her eyes, and she just simply said, "Child, sit where love is."
Wow.
And I went to the back of the bus because that's where love was happening. They were singing and talking and telling stories, beautiful, ebony-skinned women who were sitting in a place of love when the world they were living in was not so loving. So I hope that guides my life. Sit where love is. In my thinking, in my feelings, in my beliefs, sit where love is. So today we are talking about justice and compassion, and the Jewish words for justice, safat and mishpat, these two words have been mistranslated often in the scriptures as judgment. And the truer meaning of these Jewish words is not to judge, but rather to do justice for the weak and the oppressed. Often when we use the word justice, they need to be punished, and we need to make sure they get theirs. They get what's coming to them. But depending on how we're raised and what culture we're from, we have been taught many forms of, quote, justice. And so what we want to open up to, Meister Eckhart talked about this. He was a mystic, a political theologian, which I feel Martin Luther King was as well, a mystic and political theologian. Eckhart said, compassion means justice. And I keep thinking of Spike Lee, who just basically said, do the right thing. Do the right thing. Do what's right. It may not be what's the easiest. It may not be the most popular decision, but do what's right in each moment. And so compassion means justice. And again, Martin Luther King said, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting force with soul force. And somebody asked me not too long ago, how do you know what's right? And I said, you have to ask in every single moment what's right for this moment, in this place, at this time. And so that's what we're opening up to today, of what's next. Yesterday, several of us were at a community dialogue. Carlottia Scott alerted us to what was going on for Martin Luther King events. Carlottia was there, Darrell Lynn Alexander was there, Mary Wagner was there. Unity was well represented. A community dialogue of where do we go now, what do we do now in terms of human rights and doing the right thing in the world. And so, I don't know how many of you know that Carlottia Scott, Dr. Carlottia Scott, a part of this church, she's one of our board members. She has led us through strategic planning. She was the one who guided us through the gala a few years ago. Hard worker. A lot of you don't know she's a former Black Panther. And has worked tirelessly for human rights and peace, and was also with Nelson Mandela, and for the many years that it took to bring that country to a place of ending apartheid and electing him president. There's so many things to say about Carlottia, but we are very blessed for her to be here to bring us a few remarks about Martin Luther King and the ongoing efforts for human rights for all of us. And this afternoon after church, we're going to do Connect the Dots, and we're going to continue the conversation. So keep that in mind. Carlottia, we welcome you.
Well, I'm not like Reverend Margaret. I can't walk, talk, and chew gum at the same time. So bear with me. I wanted to thank Margaret and thank all of you for being here today. And as we commemorate the life and the legacy of Dr. King, what I want us to bear in mind is, although we've come a long way, we still have a long way to go. We have not yet reached the mountaintop. And someone shared with me the other day, said, well, we've come a long way. We have an African-American president. We had we had a Secretary of State. We had this, we had that. I said, yes, but we have not figured out yet how to live together and put aside the past. We have not yet learned how to feed hungry children and take care of families. We have not learned all the things that we need to do to make Dr. King's dream a reality. So, what I wanted to do was just to say that for me, commemorating Dr. King means a lot. I didn't have the opportunity to actually know him, but our paths crossed over the years. And what the commemoration of the holiday is to me is really a hope for generations to come. Because in his August speech, which became one of the most noted speeches in the country, he was really speaking to the next generations in terms of, yep, it's going to be on all of us to make sure that this dream becomes a reality. And however long it takes, we have to keep struggling to make sure that it happens. So he is the hope for generations. What I would hope that all of us would do would become the new drum majors for peace, justice, and compassion. And one of the things I found the other day, before I tell you about me, but I want to share this with you. Dr. King did a speech before his last speech, and it was called The Drum Major Instinct. And at the end of his speech, he talked about how would you want people to see you when you're no longer here in physical form. So I want to share with you his words in the speech, if I can read it. And now and then I think about my own death. I think about my own funeral. I don't think of it in a morbid sense. And every now and then I ask myself, what is it that I would want said? And I leave the words to you this morning. If any of you are around when I have met my day, I don't want a long funeral. If you get anybody to deliver a eulogy, tell them not to talk too long. Every now and then I wonder what some of them would say. Tell them not to mention that I have a Nobel Peace Prize. That's not important. Tell them not to mention that I have 300 or 400 other awards. That's really not important. Tell them not to mention where I went to school. Not important. I'd like somebody to mention that the day Martin Luther King tried to give his life serving others. I'd like for somebody to say that day that Martin Luther King Jr. tried to love somebody. What I want to say that day is that I tried to be right on the war question. I want you to be able to say that day that I did try to feed the hungry. And I want you to be able to say that day that I did try in my life to clothe those who were naked. And I want you to say that one day I did try in my life to visit those who were in prison. And I want you to say that I tried to love and serve humanity. Yes, I want you to say that I was a drum major. I was a drum major for justice. Say that I was a drum major for peace. I was a drum major for righteousness. And all of the other shallow things shall not matter. I won't have any money to leave behind. I won't have fine and luxurious things of life to leave. But I just want to leave a committed life. And that's all I want. If I can help somebody as I pass along, and I can cheer somebody with a word or a song, then my living will not be in vain. And then he ended it with the beginning of the speech. He was talking about the disciples who were talking about who was going to sit on the right hand or the left side of Jesus. And he ended it saying, yes, Jesus, I want to be on your right and left side, not for any selfish reason. I want to be on your right side, not in the terms of some political kingdom or ambition. I just want to be there in love and in justice and in truth and in commitment to others so that we can make this old world a new world. These words have been indelibly marked on my heart for years. And as I said, I think it's important that we now become the change we wish to see. And yesterday's dialogue, for us at least locally, was a beginning, so we can look at where it is we really go from here. I don't know that all of you may know a little bit about me. Margaret mentioned all that other stuff. But aside from being a card-carrying Black Panther, I am the product of activists. My father was engineering professor for years and years. Left engineering, decided to go teach on Native American reservation for years. Was coming back, headed back to Prairie View where he taught. Stopped in a little town called El Paso, Texas, of all places, and decided it was gorgeous and it was beautiful and that that's where he wanted to stay. It's like, duh. So they decided they were going to stay in El Paso. However, there were no jobs for then colored teachers in El Paso. So my father became the janitor for the Southern Pacific Railroad. And in that was the beginning lesson of how you carry on, notwithstanding the circumstance. As the last child, I was the one who was always carried along to all the organizing meetings. My father was part of a group that organized the Sleeping Car Porters Union with Ava Labrando. And his activities over the years had me, having been drugged, to many discussions, many conversations, which ended up being great activities in the long term, which became historical. But, so I have, as we said this morning in the song, I have been not only a gift, but I have been given a gift, because what I attained through life was my activism and my political awareness and my caring and my compassion, really through osmosis. I didn't have a choice. So either you were going to do it or you weren't going to do it. So that's what it is. And then I'll share a little story with you, and I think many of you may have heard this story. I've told it before several times. One year, my father on the railroad had gone someplace, and for Christmas he said to my mom, "How would you guys like to come to New Orleans for Christmas?" And my eyes lit up, and it's like, oh, man, Prairie View is in New Orleans. And so I was a happy camper. I must have been maybe 8. And so, sure, we'll meet you in New Orleans. So we get to New Orleans, and we got in before his train got in. And so we're sitting there, and I'm reading my book, because I was a little bookworm at the time. And so I told my mother, I said, "Is it okay if I go get a drink of water?" She said, "Sure, honey, go get a drink of water." She was reading her book and doing her crocheting. So I go to the water fountain, and I look at the water fountains, and there was one here, and there was one there, and one said white water, and the other one said colored water. And I was just totally perplexed because my parents had not yet shared the realities of the world with me. And so I looked, didn't understand what white water was, didn't like colored water. To me, no, it was Kool-Aid. Colored water was Kool-Aid. So I come back and I sit down, and my mom says, "Well, did you get enough water?" And I said, "No, ma'am." And she said, "Why?" And I said, "Well, there was colored water over there." And she said, "Oh my gosh." So at that moment in my history, my mother told me and taught me the lessons of the society we lived in and of which I was a part. So I come to you, having come through many iterations. I have been African American, colored, Black, you name it all. However, I stand before you as an African American, Irish Catholic, professional senior grandmother, great-grandmother, who has had many journeys. But, so I wanted to also share with you, yesterday's discussion was really meaningful, and one of the things that Dr. King had done for years and years was talk about how we could live together peacefully as a community. And in this little bitty book, you can see it's kind of old and ragged, he lays out plans on how to deal with the political situation, the war, education, housing, the whole gamut of what the Great Society was dealing with at the time. And what I wanted to share with you, oh no, that's good, is that I want to read to you, I won't read you the entire piece that I had picked out, but his wife did the preface to the book. And the preface hits home in terms of what Dr. King was really all about. It was characteristic of my husband that in 1967, when confusion in the civil rights struggle abounded, he would undertake a book entitled, "Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community?" He not only took the responsibility for leadership, he toiled vigorously to offer discerning leadership. In this book, he piercingly revealed the cause of our national discord, placing it squarely on the ingrained white racism of American society. He made discrimination and poverty the central focus of his attack. A year later, spending nearly $1 million with a huge staff, the Nation Advisory Commission on Civil Disorder was to come to the same essential conclusions. In this work, Martin Luther King Jr. stresses the common cause for all the disinherited, black and white, laying the basis for contemporary struggles now unfolding around economic issues. He spoke out sharply for all the poor in their hues, and he knew if color made them different, misery and oppression made them the same. The book is remarkably contemporary, also in its treatment of international relationships. The author here discusses poverty as a source of world instability and the arrogance of wealthy nations toward the deprived world. It is our common tragedy that we have lost his prophetic voice, but it would compound the tragedy if the lessons he did articulate are now ignored. The glowing spirit and the sharp insights of Martin Luther King Jr. are embodied in this book. The solutions he offered are still save our society from self-destruction. I hope this will be seen as a testament, and that the grief that followed his death will be transmitted to the universe's determination to realize the economic and social justice for which he so willingly gave his life. It is, I always get choked up when I think about Coretta, because although I didn't know Martin, I always had the essence of Dr. King whenever I was with her and the children. I had the opportunity in 1971 when we first went to Washington. For those of you who don't know, I worked in Washington for a congressman for almost 27 years. And we went to DC in 1971, and he was the first elected congressperson who won on an anti-war ballot. He came to Congress as the peace person, and thus began my journey for peace. But in 1971, as I stepped through the halls of Congress with my bell bottoms, my afro, and my earth shoes, the first assignment I was given was to go to John Conyers' office. He was the representative from Michigan. In 1968, John Conyers introduced the first King commemoration bill 4 days after Dr. King was assassinated. So for 68 to 71, he had been struggling trying to get people to understand the meaning and the importance of making Dr. King's birthday a federal holiday. And in 1971, here I am, rode back, and I walked into Conyers' office and said, "Oh yeah, Ron sent you to come over here and help me, huh? Okay, good. You got to do this, this, and this." And so I looked in the corner, and here was Shirley Chisholm. So Mrs. Chisholm says, "Okay, we're looking at this, 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 and this, and we need to make sure all of this happens." So I said, "Little me, yes, ma'am." And what started as a labor of love became a passionate labor of love, because much like the Free South Africa movement, although it didn't take 27 years, it took 15 years to pass the King holiday bill. And I don't know if all of you have gone to see Selma yet. Get a chance to go see Selma. And what it reminded me of, from 71 to maybe 80, we worked feverishly trying to convince folks to support the bill, make sure it could come to the floor, you know, get everything done, get the states to support it. Actually, Illinois was the first state to have a King holiday. And in 1980, Stevie Wonder wrote the Happy Birthday song that he had on his album. And during his tour, he came to Washington, and we organized a march to be held on January 15th. And when I think of the work that went into organizing that march, it is very reminiscent of the history of Selma, because you had Stevie Wonder, you had Ted Kennedy, you had Gil Scott-Heron, you had all of a bunch of the entertainment committee trying to help us go state by state to get folks to support this bill. So this snowy, cold day, I would say 6,000 people showed up in Washington, and we marched from the Capitol to the Lincoln Memorial, and then coming back up Pennsylvania Avenue, you could see, and there were little children, big children, all of us were committed to doing this. So after 15 years of struggle, we had enough sponsors to make sure that the bill was passed. It got to the Senate, and of course, Jesse Helms decided to filibuster. And in his filibuster remarks, I can remember that I had never heard such hateful spewing, because in his remarks, because he held it up for like 2 days, and his main reason for holding it up is because he called all the supporters and all the people working to make this holiday, he called them communists. We were Marxists. We were a danger to the country. And he was calling Dr. King the most dangerous person in America. So, notwithstanding the Senate, Ted Kennedy helped break the filibuster, and the bill passed in 1983. So, in seeing Selma, it brings back the memory that the day that we went to President Reagan's office for him to sign the bill, there were tears of joy, there were hugs, it was a love fest, and we knew that we had accomplished something important. So I want you always to remember that as we celebrate Dr. King, we have one day on a national register, but really we should be celebrating what he has given to us every day of the year. So I just wanted to say, you know, those few words and share a couple of stories with you. And I hope you do get a chance to go see Selma. And this quote, actually, for those of you who don't know, there were 3 marches that were planned for Selma. And this is a quote from the march that was successful when they got to Montgomery. And this quote is from the speech that Dr. King gave at the Capitol and when he was talking to George Barnes. The end we seek is a society at peace with itself and a society that can live with its conscience. I know you are asking today, how long will it take? I come to say to you this afternoon, however difficult the moment, however frustrating the hour, it will not be long. If you get a chance, go see Selma. And as Margaret had mentioned, we probably next week will go see Selma, have a Selma discussion, and then we can talk after church service about its meaning and its import. Because I think the culmination and the events of Selma laid the foundation for so much that has since followed. One of the things, just a tidbit, that my father worked on over the years, he worked with Dr. Lawrence Nixon, who initiated the Nixon versus the white primary case in Texas in 1923. That case became the foundation for the Voting Rights Act that was successfully passed after the March on Selma. Because President Johnson, like the next 3 or 4 days after the Selma incident, the bloody Sunday, made the commitment to get the bill passed. And even though he didn't get it passed in the 10 days, he was trying to get it done. It did get done, you know, by the end of the month. So, you know, a little bit of history. I think that it's important that we keep doing what we're doing, keeping our minds open, reaching out and being compassionate, and trying to attain justice for those who can't seek it for themselves. That's really our role, is to be able to be that neighbor, to be that friend, to be that comrade who can come together and help everyone try to be the best they can be. What I wanted to do, I was going to read, Margaret mentioned Dr. King and his peace effort, and one of my favorite speeches that he ever gave was April 4th, 1967 at Riverside Church in New York. And although he had given several speeches before he got to Riverside that day, he had been laying the foundation to really come out openly against the war in Vietnam. And he took that step on April 4th, 1967. And what that did activated those systems, those, I can't think of a good word for it, those bad things were put in place. And 1 year to the day later, after he had given that speech, he was assassinated at the Lorraine Motel. So what we will do after service is have a conversation. And you know, any of you can ask me questions. I don't know a lot. I've just been around and done little things, you know, here and there. But I can, you know, help guide a conversation, and there are so many works out there about the life of Dr. King. And so I'm hoping that as we celebrate his birthday, that we will remember that we still have a lot to do, and we can do it if we do it in unity and harmony and collectively to really make that dream a reality. So.
I love it when she said, I was just doing these little things, and I'm thinking, like helping Mandela get elected president of South Africa, one of those little things. Let's take a deep breath. Yesterday in the community dialogue, I had an opportunity to speak. By the way, these slides we'll still have them up for our Connect the Dots after service so that we can refer back, because there's a lot of good information on these slides. Yesterday in the community dialogue, by the way, there was he's not the sheriff, he was the captain of the Myrtle Beach Police. He was there. There was a lot of good dialogue yesterday. But in that circle of many different colors of skin in that circle, and I said out loud again that my grandfather had ridden with the Ku Klux Klan. And, to be able to say that out loud and not feel the shame that came with that in my growing up years, or didn't come with the anger and the rage that was the undercurrent of some of the people in my family. We all have the things in our lives where we were handed prejudice or handed beliefs that were divisive and painful and unkind. And we have some of those beliefs that are still unconscious within us. We don't even know sometimes that our thoughts or our words have grown out of some prejudicial idea that was given to us by culture, family, religion. So it's good for us to keep taking the deep breaths and keep doing an assessment. Are my feelings and words coming from a place of kindness? Coming from a place of compassion? And I love Eckhart's definition of that compassion is justice. And of course it is, but that was a new idea for me. It was an aha moment when I read that a few weeks ago. Compassion is justice, doing the right thing. Letting our actions grow out of that fertile field of giving our minds and our hearts over to truth, to doing the right thing. And how many of you seen Selma so far? Please see Selma. You just want to know about the history of the world that you have come into and grown up in. In Selma, there's this very precious moment where Martin Luther King is exhausted. And so many people are calling on him to do things and be somewhere and give another speech. And in the middle of the night, he gets up and he goes to the phone and he makes a phone call. And you hear him asking, will you sing me a song? He was just reaching for some encouragement and support. And his friend sang him a song, long distance over the phone. And that friend was Mahalia Jackson. Can you imagine, can you just remind me, like our song said today, I'm a gift, but if I forget, come tell me, come remind me, I'm a gift. So she reminded him with this beautiful song of who he is. I connected another dot. In 1965, the last day of my junior year, I got caught skipping school. You skip school the last day, you don't think you're going to get caught. But my mother made a phone call to the Dean of Women to get hold of me because she had booked us on a last-minute cruise, my sister and me and my mom and dad. But of course I was swimming in my friend's pool, and over the loudspeaker, Margaret Allen, please come to the office. So people were frantically calling me where I was. So, long story short, we're on the cruise, and there was this whole group of people in 1965, June of 1965. When did the last march happen? Can't remember. anyway, it was June of 1965, and this whole group of people from Selma, Alabama. And cruises, I was with my age group. There were all these girls that I was sitting with at dinner, and they were all talking about the most peculiar thing. You are a daughter of the American Republic, right? I mean, the American Revolution. You are a daughter of the American Revolution, right? I don't know. What's that? Well, you are coming out this year, right? Coming out? I wasn't involved in all that sort of things. Debutante balls and daughters of the American Revolution. My dad used to say, yeah, you're a daughter of the American Revolution. Your people were on the boat and they met the boat. But what was significant is that I extracted myself from my table mates because they were talking in ways that I had been taught not to talk. They were talking about people of color in really unkind ways. And I only connected the dot recently with 1965, and they're on a cruise while their city is doing acts of terrorism towards people of color. But I had the good sense to go find another table to sit at. So let's take a deep breath. We're going to close real quickly, but I just want to say this. When we think about where we've come from and where we are and where we're going, and what is our part in it, we've all chosen, for right now anyway, to be in a place called Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. And on PBS, 3 or 4 nights ago, there was a documentary about the history of the Klan. And 95% of the examples of violent acts from the Klan took place in, wait for it, Horry County, South Carolina. Now, let's take a deep breath. Why are we here? That was a question David asked me 10 years ago. We're all unpacking. Why are we here? In South Carolina? Didn't we need to leave the Southeast? How did we get back here? Wherever we are here to be the light. Is that true? Wherever we are, whether it's Horry County, wherever we are here to be the light. We breathe into the history that we're sitting on top of, and we help to transform and create peace, because there's a lot of old energy left from the terrorist acts that happened. So when we're feeling like we're having a hard day, and when we feel like things aren't moving fast enough for a transformed world, please remember the struggle for consciousness has been going on forever. And here we are in a place where we can be the light and help heal generational pain. We can help heal generational pain, and out of that grows peace. What a glorious task, a glorious goal, and a glorious purpose. Thank you, Carlottia. And thank you to all those who took a stand for peace, even when it meant that it was quite likely that you would have an act of unkindness launched towards you. And the struggle, whether it's human rights, gay rights, whether it is here in this country or another country, whether the struggle is about immigration, whether the struggle is about education, medicine, we lift up this idea that we can do the right thing. We can do the right thing. We can. So we take a deep breath and we say, thank you and happy birthday, Martin Luther King. We just keep dreaming. Okay. Let's go to our next sacred purpose, which is to ready our tithes, our offerings, our donations. Our church community
Get that recorded,
continues.
I hate to get you out. You were so close.
Our church community continues because you show up to give your time, your talents, your